I've worked the night shift for 3 years now, and in that time I've learned one thing. Nothing good happens after midnight. It's a phrase I used to laugh at, something parents told their kids to keep them from staying out too late. But when you spend most of your nights in dimly lit hospital rooms with people taking their last breaths, you start to feel it in your bones. There's a shift in the world when the clock strikes 12, like the night takes on a life of its own. I was feeling it that night, driving home from my shift. The road's empty except for the occasional semi-truck roaring past on the highway. My stomach growled as I rubbed my tired eyes. I had nothing in my fridge but expired yogurt and half a loaf of stale bread, so I figured I'd make a quick stop at Midnight Mart, one of those big box stores that stays open 24/7, mostly catering to truckers, shift workers, and people who didn't know any better. I fell into all three categories. The parking lot was mostly deserted, the way it always was at this hour. A few scattered cars sat beneath the buzzing yellow glow of the streetlights. Some were empty, some had people slumped over the wheel, asleep. But one car stood out, a battered old sedan parked near the entrance, its paint peeling, the windshield so grimy it looked like it hadn't been moved in weeks. The engine wasn't running, but something about it made my skin crawl. I pulled into a space near the front and shut off the engine. The air outside was thick and still, carrying that strange electric charge you sometimes feel before a storm. I stepped out and locked the car, my shoes crunching against the pavement. That's when I heard it, the sound of footsteps, soft, deliberate, close. I turned, scanning the lot. Nothing. Just the empty spaces, the flickering streetlights, the distant hum of the highway. I exhaled sharply, shaking my head at my own nerves. Too many overnight shifts were getting to me. I walked toward the entrance, but just as I reached the automatic doors, something caught my eye. Movement. A shape behind one of the parked cars. A man. He was crouched near the back of a rusted SUV, his body partially hidden in the shadows. His clothes were loose and tattered, his face gaunt, his hood pulled up over stringy hair. He wasn't doing anything, just watching me. I hesitated, my fingers tightening around my keys. He wasn't close enough to be a real threat, but something about him felt wrong. The way he stood, motionless, like he was waiting for something. The doors slid open with a mechanical hiss, and I hurried inside, forcing myself to shake it off. Homeless guy, maybe, or just some weirdo. Either way, I wasn't about to let paranoia stop me from getting my damn groceries. Inside, the store was eerily quiet. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a sickly, artificial glow. The aisles stretched out in neat, endless rows, mostly empty except for a few employees stocking shelves in silence. I grabbed a basket and started down the aisles, trying to ignore the lingering unease in my chest. Printer ink, coffee, a few snacks, quick in, quick out. I was halfway through my list when I felt it again, that sensation. That prickle at the back of my neck, like the weight of unseen eyes pressing down on me. I slowed my steps, glancing at the end of the aisle. There he was, the man from the parking lot. He stood at the end of the row, just far enough that I could almost pretend he wasn't watching me. But he was. His posture was stiff, unnatural. He wasn't shopping, he wasn't holding anything. He was just there. I turned away quickly, my heart thudding against my ribs. Maybe he had just wandered in after me. Maybe I was reading too much into it. But as I moved through the store, I kept seeing him. Every aisle I turned down, he was there. Always at a distance. Always watching. I quickened my pace, my basket growing heavier in my grip. This was ridiculous. I was a grown man, a nurse who had seen people die, had watched families break apart in hospital hallways. A weirdo in a Walmart shouldn't scare me. And yet, my hands were shaking. I turned the corner into the frozen food section, reaching for a bag of ice cream bars I didn't even want. Just something to occupy my hands. And then, a whisper, low, raspy. "They're watching us. We shouldn't be here." I spun around so fast I nearly dropped the basket. The man stood just a few feet away now, closer than before. His eyes were wide and bloodshot, his lips cracked and trembling. I could smell him. Sweat. Something stale and rotten. "Excuse me?" I forced out, my voice steadier than I felt. He shook his head violently, his breath coming fast. "See everything?" he muttered. "They know you saw me." My stomach twisted. "I don't know what you're talking about, man." He took a step closer, and I took a step back. "You have to leave now," he whispered, his fingers twitching at his sides, "before they decide what to do with you." I turned and walked away, forcing myself not to run. I abandoned my basket near the registers and made a beeline for the exit. My breathing was shallow, my hands clammy. The moment I stepped outside, the night air hit me like a wall. I fumbled with my keys, my mind racing. Maybe he was just some unhinged conspiracy nut. Maybe he was messing with me. But then I saw him, standing in the parking lot, not moving, not chasing, just pointing at the sky. I followed his gaze, nothing, just the moon hanging low and swollen, clouds drifting lazily across the vast, star-speckled blackness. I didn't stick around to figure out what he meant. I got in my car and locked the doors, my breath coming fast as I yanked the gear shift into reverse. As I pulled out of the lot, I risked one last glance in the rear-view mirror. He was still there, still pointing, his lips moving, but I couldn't hear the words. I drove home faster than I ever had before, my pulse hammering the whole way. I tried to put it behind me, to tell myself it was nothing, just a crazy guy in a Walmart, just another weird night. But that's the thing. Since that night, every time I pass that store, whether it's on my way to work or just running errands, a faint crackling static on my radio, like a voice trying to break through, and the strangest thing, there's always a metallic taste in my mouth. I didn't sleep well after that night at Midnight Mart. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that man in the hooded jacket, standing motionless in the parking lot with his finger pointed at the sky. The crackling static on my phone hadn't stopped either. Calls dropped without reason, and the taste of metal lingered on my tongue whenever I drove past the store. I told myself I was just imagining it, that night shift exhaustion was playing tricks on me. But deep down I knew better. The world changes after midnight. It peels back a thin layer of reality and lets you see what you shouldn't. I had seen something that night, and now something, or someone, knew I had. But life doesn't stop just because you're scared. People still get sick, bills still pile up, and groceries still need buying. That's what Megan Taylor told herself when she pulled into that same parking lot on a quiet, sunny afternoon. She had no idea about the hooded man or the static on the phone. She had never tasted metal in the air or seen shadowy figures through the aisles. All she wanted was to buy some school supplies with her niece. She didn't know the nightmare that waited for her. It started with a plan as ordinary as any other. Pick up notebooks, pencils, and a calculator for her niece, Sarah's freshman year. Sarah was the kind of teenager who constantly bounced between moody silence and non-stop chatter. That afternoon, she was firmly in chatter mode, rambling about her new math teacher, the fall dance, and the latest YouTuber drama Megan couldn't care less about. The sun was bright, the breeze was warm, and Megan had no reason to feel nervous when she parked the car. Midnight Mart sat there like it always did, bland, unassuming, and deceptively welcoming beneath its blue and white sign. The parking lot was half full, mostly with parents and their kids doing back-to-school shopping, but Megan hesitated as she cut the engine. "Everything okay?" Sarah asked, stuffing her phone into her back pocket. "Yeah," Megan said, forcing a smile. "Just tired." Except she wasn't tired. Something about the parking lot felt off. The air was thick with humidity, buzzing with unseen tension. She glanced around and noticed a pickup truck parked a few rows away. It was old and rusty, with a shattered taillight and dented bumper. Inside the cab sat a man wearing a camouflage jacket and a baseball cap. His head was tilted downward as if he were asleep, but his posture was too rigid, like he was listening for something. Megan shook it off. It was just a guy resting in his truck, nothing more. "Come on," she said to Sarah. "Let's get this over with." The moment they walked through the automatic doors, the air conditioning hit like a slap. Megan shivered, though the store wasn't particularly cold. She grabbed a cart, and they headed toward the school supply aisle. The place was busier than she expected. Parents with half-price carts argued with their kids over pencil cases and calculators. A toddler threw a box of crayons on the ground while his mother tried to reason with him. It was chaotic, noisy, normal. Megan relaxed a little. They filled the cart quickly, picking up notebooks, binders, and a calculator that cost more than she'd wanted to spend. They were halfway through the list when Sarah tugged Megan's sleeve. "The guy's weird," she said, her voice low. Megan followed her niece's gaze. The man from the truck stood at the end of the aisle. Same camouflage jacket, same baseball cap. His face was partially hidden by the shadow of the shelves, but his eyes were visible, unblinking, focused directly on them. Megan's stomach dropped. "Let's go," she said, forcing calm into her voice. They pushed the cart into the next aisle. The shelves towered around them like silent sentinels. Megan's pulse quickened as she glanced behind them. The man was still there, standing at the end of the aisle again. He hadn't turned the corner. He just appeared. Her mind scrambled for a rational explanation. Maybe he was just browsing. Maybe they were overreacting. But he wasn't holding a cart. He wasn't holding anything. "Leave the cart," Megan whispered. Sarah's eyes widened. But now, they abandoned the cart and hurried toward the front of the store. The aisles stretched endlessly, the shelves feeling too tall, too narrow. Megan risked another glance over her shoulder. The man was following them. His steps were slow, deliberate. He didn't weave around other shoppers. He just stopped whenever they stopped, walked whenever they walked. His face never shifted from that empty, predatory stare. Megan's breath caught in her throat as she reached the self-checkout area. A bored cashier glanced up from her phone. Megan almost called for help. But what would she say? "A man is looking at us weirdly? Come on," she said to Sarah, gripping her niece's wrist. The automatic door slid open with a mechanical hum. They stepped into the parking lot, sunlight flooding their eyes. The warmth felt surreal after the icy, artificial glow of the store. But the relief didn't last. "Where's the car?" Sarah asked, panicking. Megan scanned the lot. The truck with the broken taillight was gone. They ran toward their car. Halfway there, Megan heard it. Footsteps behind them. Fast, steady, matching their pace exactly. "Don't look back," she said, fumbling with the keys in her pocket. Sarah whimpered but obeyed. The car was 30 feet away. Then 20. Then 10. Megan unlocked the doors and shoved Sarah into the passenger seat before scrambling into the driver's seat and slamming the locks down. The footsteps stopped. The man stood 5 feet from the car, breathing heavily. His chest rose and fell beneath the camouflage jacket. His face was blank except for his eyes. He smiled then, tilting his head. Megan jammed the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life. The man lunged toward the driver's side window. His hand slapped the glass, his mouth moving soundlessly. His breath fogged the glass as his lips formed two words. "See you." Megan floored the gas pedal. The tires squealed as the car shot backward. She jerked the wheel, shifted into drive, and sped toward the lot's exit. In the rearview mirror, the man stood in the middle of the aisle, watching them go. Megan didn't slow until she reached the main road. Her hands trembled on the wheel. Beside her, Sarah sobbed softly, clutching her seatbelt. Neither spoke the entire way home. That night, Megan locked every window and double-checked the doors. She stood by the window, staring at the darkened street for hours. Her phone sat in her palm, the number for the police dialed but not called. What could she say? She barely slept. The next morning, Sarah found it. A crumpled piece of paper tucked beneath the windshield wiper. A receipt from Midnight Mart. The handwriting was uneven, jagged, as though etched with a broken pen. "See you soon, Sarah." The next day, the static started on Megan's phone. Crackling bursts whenever she tried to call someone, and that metallic taste in her mouth every time she passed the store. The man hadn't been there by accident. He'd been waiting. And now, he knew their names. After what happened to Megan and Sarah, I started paying closer attention to stories about Midnight Mart. Not just online, but in town. It didn't take much digging. People had always said there was something off about the place, especially at night. But now, the stories were growing. More and more people described the same things. Shadowy figures that vanished when you turned around. Crackling static in phone calls, a metallic taste in the air, and people watching. Always watching. That's how I heard about Daniel Reed. His story didn't make the papers. It never does when something like this happens. No police reports, no news coverage, just a man with dark circles under his eyes who couldn't shake the feeling that someone was coming for his son. This is what Daniel told me when I met him weeks after his nightmare began. I never liked taking Noah shopping with me, but my wife had a late meeting that night, and our pantry was practically empty. Besides, the kid loved the toy aisle. 5 years old and full of endless questions, Noah had more energy than I could keep up with. A simple grocery trip could feel like running a marathon. We got to Midnight Mart around 6:30, just as the sun dipped below the horizon. The sky was streaked with orange and pink, and the parking lot was half empty. I didn't even think twice about it. Inside, Noah tugged at my hand, begging to see the toys first. "Just 5 minutes, Daddy," he pleaded, his hazel eyes wide. "I promise." I laughed. 5 minutes in the toy aisle was never just 5 minutes, but I gave in. The store was louder than usual, carts rattling, conversations blending into a dull murmur beneath the constant hum of the fluorescent lights. We navigated through the aisles, past the frozen foods and electronics, until Noah's face lit up at the sight of brightly colored shelves packed with trucks, robots, and dinosaurs. "Go ahead, buddy," I said, pulling out my phone to check the shopping list. "You'll stay where I can see you." Noah darted ahead, sneakers flashing with each step. I scrolled through the list. Milk, bread, pasta, chicken, and absently glanced up. He was gone. "Hey, Noah?" My voice echoed slightly in the aisle. No response. I walked toward the rows of shelves, calling his name louder. "Noah, this isn't funny. Come out now." Silence. Panic settled in, icy and sharp. I checked the next aisle. Empty. The next one after that, too. My heart hammered in my chest. My son wasn't a wanderer. He knew better than to leave my sight in a store. I was about to shout for an employee when I heard it. Soft, faint, giggling. Noah's giggle. I followed the sound past the action figures, around a corner, and stopped dead. Noah stood there, holding a stranger's hand. The woman crouched beside him, had stringy gray hair pulled back into a loose bun. Her clothes were old-fashioned, an oversized floral dress with a faded cardigan. Her skin was pale, almost waxy, stretched tight over sharp cheekbones. "Noah?" My voice cracked. The woman's head turned toward me slowly, unnaturally, as if her neck were a rusted hinge. Her lips stretched into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "He's such a delightful little boy," she said softly. "Ooh, curious. Just like my David." My body moved before my brain caught up. I lunged forward and yanked Noah away from her. His small hand trembled in mine as I pulled him close. He looked up at me, confused. "She said she knew you," Noah whispered. "She said I looked like David." "Who the hell are you?" I demanded, stepping back. The woman didn't stand. She remained crouched on the floor, head tilted, eyes glassy and unblinking. "My son," she said, voice trembling with something like sadness. "David was just his age when they took him, and now they've given me Noah." Noah whimpered against my leg. I gripped his wrist tighter and backed away. The woman didn't move, but her eyes tracked us with predatory focus. I broke into a sprint, dragging Noah through the aisles toward the checkout. My heart raced, my breath ragged. We passed startled shoppers, but I didn't stop. I didn't even look back until we reached the registers. I finally glanced behind me. She was gone. The cashier gave me a wary look as I fumbled for my wallet with shaking hands. I paid, grabbed the bags, and rushed out the door with Noah. The parking lot was brighter than I remembered, the streetlights casting long skeletal shadows. We hurried to the car, locked the doors, and I drove off without even buckling Noah's seatbelt properly. I didn't breathe easily until we turned onto our street 10 minutes later. At home, I locked every door and window. Noah sat on the couch, silent for once, eyes wide. I knelt in front of him. "Did she say anything else to you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Noah nodded. "She said she was gonna come back." I stayed up all night, watching the street through the living room window. The next day, I called the police. They took my statement but didn't seem too concerned. No security footage showed the woman. The store manager swore they'd never seen her before. One officer suggested Noah might have imagined her. Kids have vivid imaginations, he said with a shrug. That night, I found the toy soldier. It was sitting on our doorstep, a wooden figure with chipping paint and tiny black eyes that seemed to follow me as I picked it up. I didn't know where it came from. Noah didn't own any toys like it. I threw it in the trash and spent the night pacing the house, every shadow stretching too far, every creak in the walls making my skin crawl. By morning, the soldier was back on the doorstep. I burned it this time. The smoke stung my eyes, sharp and metallic. The flames crackled in a way that sounded almost like whispering. We haven't gone back to Midnight Mart since. We avoid toy stores. I don't let Noah out of my sight in public anymore. But sometimes, late at night, I hear giggling outside his bedroom window. Soft, faint, and when I go to check, the curtains shift as though someone just moved away. The police think I'm paranoid. My wife says it's just leftover trauma. But I know better. Because last night, Noah woke up screaming. When I ran to his room, he was standing in the corner, trembling. "So was here," he sobbed. The lady with the toy soldier. His small hand clutched something tightly. I pried his fingers open and felt my stomach drop. It was another toy soldier, identical to the one I had burned, but this one had a name carved into the base. Noah. When Daniel finished telling me his story, he looked at me with eyes that had seen too much. I didn't have words to comfort him. There were no words for something like that. But I understood. The night peels back the layers of reality. Midnight Mart isn't just a store. It's a doorway, a hunting ground. And there are things that walk its aisles, waiting for the right person at the right time. That metallic taste in the air, it's not imaginary. It's the scent of something crossing over, something watching. And once it finds you, like it found Daniel and Noah, it never really leaves. After hearing Daniel's story about the woman in the toy aisle, I stopped trying to rationalize what was happening at Midnight Mart. Something was wrong with that store. It wasn't just a string of creepy coincidences or paranoid night shifters seeing shadows in the aisles. No, this was something else, something darker. But what scared me the most wasn't the toy soldier on Daniel's doorstep, or the man in the hooded jacket from my own encounter. It was the pattern, the way the fear spread like a crack in glass, unseen at first, but widening with each story. I wasn't the only one who felt it, and Lisa Monroe, a cashier at Midnight Mart, would soon learn the hard way. I never liked working the night shift. It was supposed to be temporary, just a way to earn extra cash while I finished school. But like a lot of things in life, temporary became permanent before I even noticed. Midnight Mart wasn't exactly a dream job, but it paid the bills, and at 2 a.m., the store usually felt more like a ghost town than a retail nightmare. That night started like any other. I clocked in, grabbed a lukewarm cup of coffee from the break room, and settled behind the customer service desk. The store was practically empty. The only sounds were the distant hum of the refrigeration units and the faint crackle of a radio somewhere in the back. I didn't feel nervous then, not until the static started. It came through the store's intercom system, a faint hiss like an untuned radio. I assumed it was just interference from a passing truck. Happens all the time, I told myself. But then the static resolved into something else. A whisper. At first it was too low to make out, just a soft, distorted murmur beneath the static. I turned toward the intercom speaker above the desk, squinting like that would help me understand the sound. That's when I heard it clearly. "Don't turn around." My heart lurched in my chest. I whipped my head around anyway. The store was empty. The aisle stretched into the distance, lined with neatly stocked shelves bathed in flickering fluorescent light. I was about to grab the phone and call security when I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. A figure, half hidden behind a pallet of bottled water in aisle 6. A man, tall, thin, and still. He didn't move when I looked at him. He didn't pretend to shop or wander like a normal customer. He just stood there, watching. I tried to ignore the icy dread creeping up my spine. Customers came in all shapes and sizes. Maybe he was drunk or high, or maybe my imagination was still stuck on the weird static. I picked up the walkie-talkie clipped to my belt and pressed the button. "Hey, Mark? There's a guy hanging out near aisle 6. Looks kinda sketchy. Can you check it out?" Silence. I tried again. Mark? You there? The radio crackled softly. Then, through the static, came the voice. Lisa. I froze. The voice was distorted but familiar. My own name, spoken in a low, deliberate tone. I didn't recognize the voice. It wasn't Mark. The hairs on my neck stood on end. Don't turn around, the voice repeated. I felt the blood drain from my face. The figure in aisle 6 was gone. Stood there for a few seconds, pulse racing, heart slamming against my ribs. The coffee cup in my hand trembled. I needed to get to the break room. I didn't know why, but instinct screamed that it was the safest place to be. The break room door locked. And it had a phone with a direct line to security. I rounded the desk and walked briskly toward the back of the store, passing aisle after aisle without looking into them. I didn't want to see him again. But then, just as I passed the cleaning supplies, I saw movement in my peripheral vision. He was standing there, closer this time. His skin was pale, almost gray beneath the lights. His eyes were unnaturally wide, staring straight at me. He tilted his head slightly, as if curious, and then he smiled. His mouth stretched too wide, the corners cracking his skin. He mouthed something without speaking. I didn't need to hear the words to understand them. Don't run. But I did. I sprinted toward the break room, my footsteps echoing through the store. The shelves blurred past me. The hum of the overhead lights grew louder with each step, until it became a deafening buzz. The break room door was 10 feet away when I heard the footsteps behind me. Fast, heavy, getting closer. I hit the door, shoved it open and slammed it shut behind me. My fingers fumbled with the lock, twisting it until it clicked into place. Silence. I collapsed against the door, breathing hard, straining to hear through the pounding of my heart. For a moment there was nothing. No footsteps, no breathing. Then, soft tapping. A single finger tracing a slow, deliberate circle against the door's surface. The sound moved upward until it reached the narrow glass window set into the door. I didn't want to look. God help me, I didn't want to. But I did. He was there, on the other side of the glass. His smile was wider now, stretched so far it looked like his jaw might snap. His eyes, deep, empty voids, locked with mine. His finger tapped the glass once more, then stopped. His lips moved again. See you soon. The lights in the break room flickered. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I snatched it out and looked at the screen. Unknown caller. With trembling hands I answered. Hello? My voice was barely a whisper. Static crackled in my ear. Then the voice spoke, soft and slow. Don't turn around. The line went dead. I stared at the phone for what felt like hours, until a sharp knock startled me. My heart nearly burst out of my chest. Lisa? Security? The voice was familiar. Real. I unlocked the door with numb fingers. 2 security guards stood there, both looking confused. You okay? One of them asked. You sounded scared on the call. I blinked. I didn't call you. The guards exchanged a glance. Yeah, you did, the taller one said, holding up his radio. The guard exchanged a glance. Dispatch said you called and said you needed immediate assistance. I shook my head. I didn't. The radio crackled. A voice came through. Don't turn around! The guards jumped. I clapped my hand over my mouth. The taller guard immediately unholstered his flashlight and stepped into the store. His partner followed. I stayed in the break room, every nerve in my body screaming at me to run. I didn't. They never found anyone. But later, when they reviewed the security footage, they saw something I wished I'd never known. The man had been there the whole time, standing directly behind me at the service desk, watching me. The footage ended abruptly, corrupted by static. That was a month ago. I quit my job the next morning. But the static still finds me, on my phone, my TV, even the car radio, and sometimes, when I'm alone in my apartment at night, I hear footsteps just outside my door. I know if I open it, I'll see him there, waiting, smiling, and whispering those same 3 words. Don't turn around. After Lisa's story, I stopped driving past Midnight Mart entirely. It wasn't just the static on the radio or the metallic taste that clung to the back of my throat whenever I was near. It was the growing realization that whatever haunted that store wasn't just confined to its aisles. It followed people, found ways to worm into their lives, into their homes. Lisa saw the figure, standing behind her on the security footage. Daniel found the toy soldier with his son's name carved into it. Megan discovered that crumpled receipt with her niece's name scribbled across it. They all tried to forget, but Midnight Mart doesn't forget you. That's what happened to Eric Davis. He thought he left the store behind him, but the road home is never as empty as it seems. I've driven trucks most of my life, long-haul deliveries, short runs around town, you name it, I've done it. Nights are the worst, though. People think the roads are quieter after midnight, but they don't understand. The darkness stretches forever, and your mind starts playing tricks on you if you're not careful. That night, I was coming back from a warehouse run. It was just after 1 a.m., and my stomach was growling. Midnight Mart was the only place open, so I swung into the parking lot, figuring I'd grab a snack and a soda to keep me awake for the last stretch of my shift. The lot was almost empty. A handful of cars were parked close to the entrance, their windows fogged with condensation. I parked near a streetlight and cut the engine. The truck's headlights bathed the pavement in a harsh yellow glow. That's when I saw it. 2 spaces away sat an old rusted sedan. Nothing unusual there, except for what was in the passenger seat. A figure, still, motionless. The face was turned away from me, shadowed beneath the car's dirty window. The body was rigid, posture stiff. It reminded me of those mannequins you see in department stores, the kind that never quite look right. I leaned forward to get a better look. The figure's head twitched slightly. I froze. The head turned toward me. The face was smooth, featureless, a pale waxy surface with no eyes, no nose, just a thin slit of a mouth. It moved, though I couldn't hear what it was saying through the glass. The temperature inside my truck dropped. My breath fogged the windshield. My pulse hammered in my ears. I told myself I was overtired, that it was some prank or a weird prop someone left behind. I didn't even realize my hands were shaking until I fumbled the keys trying to lock the doors. I should have left. I know that now. But something about the figure held me there. I couldn't stop staring at that blank face. The mouth moved again, slowly forming words I couldn't hear. Then it stopped, and it smiled. The mouth stretched too far across the smooth skin, exposing teeth that were small and sharp, like shards of broken porcelain. The grin was unnatural, predatory. I didn't think. I opened the door and stepped out, driven by some instinct to prove to myself that it wasn't real, that it was just some elaborate prank. The cold night air hit me like a slap. I took a few steps toward the sedan. My footsteps echoed across the lot. The figure didn't move. The mouth stopped smiling. I was 5 feet away when the figure tilted its head. The mouth opened as though taking a deep breath. Then it whispered. Even from that distance I heard it perfectly, like the words slid directly into my brain. Eric. I staggered backward. My name. It knew my name. The mouth stretched into that grotesque grin again. The head twitched once more, then collapsed sideways against the window like a puppet whose strings had been cut. I ran. I didn't look back. The automatic doors whooshed open as I sprinted into the store, my breath ragged. The cashier, a teenage kid with earbuds in, barely glanced up. I grabbed a bag of chips, a soda, and headed for the register. My hands trembled as I swiped my card. The kid gave me a weird look, but didn't say anything. Hey, I forced out, my voice cracking. Did you see anyone come in just now? The cashier shook his head. Nah, man, it's been dead all night. I paid and left without another word. The parking lot was empty when I came out. The sedan was gone. The passenger seat where the figure had sat was empty. I climbed into my truck and locked the doors. My eyes darted from mirror to mirror. The lot was still, the street lights buzzing softly. I turned the key in the ignition. The radio clicked on. Static crackled through the speakers. I reached to turn it off. Eric. The voice whispered from the speakers, distorted, faint, but unmistakable. My breath caught in my throat. The rearview mirror tilted slightly. I hadn't touched it. The mirror showed the empty back seat. Then something shifted in the shadows. Then a figure sat directly behind me. Pale skin, smooth face, wide mouth stretched into that awful grin. I slammed my foot on the gas. The truck lurched forward. The tires squealed as I careened out of the lot, turning wildly onto the main road. The figure didn't move. Its empty eyes stared at me in the mirror, mouth twitching like it was laughing without sound. The radio hissed. "Next time, keep driving." The truck swerved as I yanked the steering wheel. The back tires fishtailed. I tried to straighten it, but my hands were slick with sweat. The figure leaned closer. I felt its breath, icy and metallic against my neck. The road blurred. My vision narrowed. Then everything exploded into a shower of glass and twisted metal. I woke up in the hospital. A nurse stood beside me, checking the monitors. My head throbbed, and every muscle ached. "Happened." My voice was raw. "You crashed into a street light," the nurse said. "You're lucky. No one else was hurt." "No one else?" My stomach turned. "No passengers," she said. "The police found you alone." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But that night, when I finally turned on my phone, I saw the text. "Unknown number. Next time, keep driving." I quit my delivery job the next day. But it doesn't matter. The static followed me. The pale figure appears in reflections when I walk past darkened windows, and every time I drive at night, I feel it behind me, waiting, smiling, whispering my name. After Eric's crash, I stopped collecting the stories. I didn't want to know more. I didn't want to hear about the static-picked calls or the figures with empty eyes. Midnight Mart wasn't just a store anymore. It was something else, something that reached beyond its aisles, beyond its parking lot. It followed people, found ways to worm into their lives, into their homes. Eric survived, but he wasn't the same. He wouldn't talk about what he saw in the back seat, just kept muttering, "Next time, keep driving." He sold his truck and moved to another state, but it didn't matter. I know that now, because the stories didn't stop. The store didn't stop. It just found someone new. Abby Clark hated shopping at Midnight Mart. She hated the harsh lights, the echoing aisles, and the endless maze of shelves that seemed to shift when you weren't paying attention. But she was retired, living alone, and it was the closest store to her house. Besides, mornings were supposed to be safe. She never went after dark, not after what happened to her neighbor's kid, Sarah Taylor. She'd heard the whispers, the way people talked about that strange man following Sarah and her aunt through the aisles. So Abby stuck to the daytime. That morning was like any other. She parked in her usual spot, 2 rows from the entrance directly beneath a streetlight, even though it was broad daylight. Old habits die hard. As she climbed out of her car, she noticed something strange. The air smelled metallic, like pennies left too long in the sun. The kind of sharp, coppery tang you might catch before a lightning strike. Abby shrugged it off and headed inside. The store was quiet, just the way she liked it. She grabbed a cart and moved through the aisles with practiced efficiency. Bread, eggs, milk, and a few canned goods for the week. Everything was perfectly normal, until she reached the cleaning supplies aisle. That's when she saw the woman. She was standing at the far end of the aisle, her back turned. Her hair was pulled into a tight bun, and she wore an old-fashioned, ankle-length dress with a faded floral pattern. She wasn't looking at the shelves or pushing a cart. She was just standing there. Abby stopped mid-step. Something about the woman felt wrong. The dress was outdated, like something from a 1970s catalog. But it wasn't just the clothes. It was the way she held herself, rigid and still, as though she didn't quite know how to be human, and then she moved. Not naturally. Not like someone turning to check a price tag. She turned her head too far, until it twisted unnaturally over her shoulder. Her face was pale, skin stretched thin over sharp cheekbones. Her lips didn't move, but Abby saw her mouth form a single word. "Stay." Abby's stomach nodded. The woman turned away again and walked around the corner, her steps soundless. Abby's hands shook as she clutched the cart. "Calm down," she told herself. "Just a weird customer, nothing more." She abandoned the rest of her list and went to check out. The cashier was a teenage boy with acne and bored eyes. As he scanned her items, Abby stole a glance at the large glass windows near the entrance. The woman was there, standing outside, watching Abby through the glass. Her lips moved again. "Stay." "Ma'am?" the cashier said. Abby startled. "What? Your card. You need to insert it." She fumbled with her wallet, swiped the card, grabbed her bags, and hurried toward the exit. The woman was gone. Abby's heart hammered as she stepped into the parking lot. The morning sun was blinding, the heat pressing down on her shoulders. She scanned the lot. No sign of the woman, but the metallic taste in the air was stronger now. Abby unlocked her car, threw the bags into the passenger seat, and slid behind the wheel. The car started with a low rumble. She gripped the steering wheel and exhaled shakily. Just as she put the car in reverse, her phone buzzed in the cup holder. The screen lit up with an unknown number. Her thumb hovered over the decline button, but something made her answer. "Hello?" Static crackled on the other end. Then the whisper came. "Stay." Abby dropped the phone. She slammed the car into drive and tore out of the parking lot, tires squealing. Her breath came in shallow gasps as she sped through the familiar streets toward home. At every stop sign, every intersection, she checked the mirrors. She never saw the woman, but she felt her. The metallic taste thickened. The air grew heavy with each passing block. Her house finally came into view. She veered into the driveway, threw the car into park, and raced inside, locking the door behind her. The silence of the empty house did nothing to calm her. She moved through the rooms, pulling down blinds, checking locks, switching on every light. Her phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. Abby ignored it. The calls kept coming. Every few minutes. By noon, she'd turned off the phone completely. That afternoon, she sat at the kitchen table, sipping lukewarm coffee and trying to make sense of what happened. She convinced herself it was stress, anxiety. Maybe she'd seen an old woman who looked a little strange. Maybe the phone calls were just coincidence. By evening, she almost believed it, until she went to close the living room curtains. The woman was standing on the sidewalk across the street, hands at her sides, mouth smiling, eyes empty. The street lamp flickered above her. Her lips moved again. "Stay." Abby backed away from the window, heart slamming against her ribs. She locked herself in the bedroom, huddled beneath the blankets like a child. She didn't sleep. The next morning, the woman was gone, but the metallic taste lingered. Abby tried to go about her day like normal, but the tension in her chest wouldn't go away. Every shadow felt too deep. Every creak of the floorboards made her jump. By lunchtime, she'd had enough. She grabbed her purse and left the house, deciding to drive to her sister's place across town. The moment she backed out of the driveway, her phone, still powered off, buzzed from the passenger seat. The screen was lit up. Unknown number. Stay. Abby's vision blurred with panic. She floored the gas pedal, speeding through familiar streets. She didn't slow down. She didn't check the mirrors. Until she reached the railroad crossing. The red lights flashed. The crossing arms lowered. A distant train's horn blared through the thick air. The car sputtered. The engine died. Abby jammed the key in the ignition. Nothing. The train's horn grew louder, closer. Her phone buzzed again. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she looked down. Unknown number. Time's up. The passenger door clicked open. The woman slid into the seat beside her. Her skin was waxy, her smile too wide. She leaned close, her cold breath brushing Abby's ear. "I told you to stay." The train roared closer. Abby screamed. She woke up hours later. Paramedics stood over her. The train had passed without hitting her car. The engine had restarted on its own. No one saw the woman. But later that night, Abby found a single receipt tucked beneath her windshield wiper. A Midnight Mart receipt with one word written in shaky black ink. "Stay." I tried calling Abby the next day. Her phone went straight to voicemail. The next week, Midnight Mart boarded up its windows. A sign out front said it was closing for renovations, but I know better. It's not over. Because last night I woke up to the metallic taste of blood on my tongue. And when I checked my phone, September 10th, unknown number. They're watching, and I know exactly who they are. Midnight Mart isn't just a store. It's a doorway, and once it opens for you, it never really closes. If you've made it this far, thank you for stepping into the unsettling world of Midnight Mart. 6 stories, 6 different lives, all connected by a single, unassuming store. It seems impossible, doesn't it, how a place as ordinary as a 24-hour discount store could become a hunting ground for something far more sinister. But that's the nature of fear. It often hides in the mundane, in the quiet hum of fluorescent lights, in the static on a late-night phone call, in the way shadows stretch just a little too far beneath streetlights. We go about our daily routines, convinced we understand the world around us, until something cracks that reality and we glimpse the truth hiding behind the shelves. What happened to Ethan, Megan, Daniel, Lisa, Eric, and Abby serves as a chilling reminder. We are never as alone as we think. Whether it's a stranger in a parking lot or an old woman whispering, "Stay," when no one else can see her, danger doesn't always announce itself with a scream. Sometimes it comes quietly. A presence just out of sight. A figure in the rear-view mirror. So, what's the lesson here? First, trust your instincts. If the hairs on the back of your neck stand up, if your gut tells you something's wrong, listen. Too often we dismiss those feelings as paranoia. But fear evolved to protect us. It's an ancient alarm system that knows more than we give it credit for. Second, stay aware of your surroundings. We live in a world of distractions. Phones, earbuds, endless scrolling. But predators, both human and otherwise, rely on that distraction. When you're walking through a parking lot late at night, put the phone away, look around, be present. And finally, remember, evil doesn't always come with a mask or a weapon. Sometimes it looks like a friendly stranger, an innocent child's toy, or a reflection in a dark window. So the next time you're in a store late at night and you feel that creeping sensation that someone's watching you, don't dismiss it, look around. And if you hear static crackling in your phone, taste metal in the air, or see a figure that seems off, leave. Because some doors, once opened, never fully close. A message from Horror Stories. Thank you for watching and experiencing this terrifying journey with us. At Horror Stories, we work hard to bring you gripping, spine-chilling tales that stay with you long after the video ends. If this story gave you chills, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Have you ever had an eerie experience in a seemingly ordinary place? Share it in the comments, we'd love to hear it. And remember, stay safe, stay alert, and next time you're out running errands, maybe skip the late-night trip to the store. Because sometimes, the shadows aren't just in your head. See you in the next nightmare.